a Dredfunn original production. Please sit back and enjoy.
Hey guys, Dredfunn here with another one of my uploads. Recently at the Ottawa Comic Con, a bizarre thing happened. One of my friends from Kaboom Comics, they are vendors that that sell old comics and comic runs. If you're ever interested in any old comics, they're a great company. You can catch online or check them out at a lot of the shows in Eastern Ontario. So anyways, he had recently gone and talked to Neal Adams, the legendary artist, and he asked me if I wanted to go talk with him. So before the show started, I went and had a 10-15 minute conversation with the legend, Neal Adams. It blew my mind. It was not the type of conversation I was expecting to have. I didn't videotape it. I didn't take photos. For all intents and purposes, you can say I'm lying. I mean, for me, it was just a personal moment that I relished, because at these shows, my anxiety levels are so through the roof that I'm literally vibrating sometimes, trying to keep myself still and not be a douche, which I can be a lot. So first thing, I haven't even had my tea, and I'm going to talk to a guy that I admire. And like I've said many times, people that you admire are those that you look up to that you don't hate anymore, or you don't yet hate. So talking to Neal, first off, we had a handshake, which was reminiscent of my grandfather, the big burly handshake, get it in there and give the good squeeze. And then we started talking about, banal things. I mean, art. And he actually trolled me, which was really good, because my eyes were looking at a lot of his comic book work, his cover work, and stuff that he's done as Superman, for Superman in DC Comics. And then he started pointing me to some of these realistic images. And I believe that my friend had talked to him about how I do realistic stuff as well. So he's got a Wonder Woman and T'Challa and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, those are really good. And he said, what do you think of those? And I'm like, they're great. And he said, traced, pretty much traced. I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah. And then we had this, like I said, this whole conversation for the next 2-3 minutes was about tracing, and how many of the great artists like Norman Rockwell and many others, so many I can't even name, would trace a lot of their work. And I asked him to clarify, what does he mean by trace? And, you take a photo, put it down, and you take a piece of paper, you put it over it, and you trace it. What? Yeah, a lot of artists do this. And now at first I'm thinking, well, am I offended? Is that bad? Is that wrong? I mean, can anybody do it? Well, that's the key. Not anyone can do it. It's all the other things, the application of the paint, what you decide to trace, how you trace it, what you interpret. There's a lot of stuff that goes in, and a lot of that was unsaid between Neal and myself, or at least I assumed it was, because it wasn't said. And as we're talking about this and how I'm, getting an insight of how, he progressed to this thought and this approach, and there was not a sense of disdain in his voice, but a sense of an older teacher that has seen a lot and is now at the farther end of the road, and he's getting a chuckle out of those of us at the start of the road, and all the things that we think are important, and ultimately what really is important isn't, in a weird sort of way. And then we started talking about, I just, in a passing gesture, mentioned that I like to teach art. And on occasion, especially this summer, I'll be going back to do it once or twice a week, teaching at the YMCA, teaching a wide range of kids how to draw and how to approach drawing. And in the past, I told them one of the things that I've done with many of these kids is I've shown them how to trace. And I've shown them how to trace other artists' work. I've shown them how to trace coloring book work. I've showed them how to trace books or images in magazines. That's not the only thing we do. We don't just trace. I mean, there's symmetrical drawings, breaking down the human form into shapes, breaking down, a phone into shapes, making chocolate chip cookies or drawing chocolate chip cookies with tea. All of these are little personal projects that I've done with the kids over the years. And that led to, talking about what it means and what it... It's really hard for me to try to put it into words and present it to you because, like I said, it was a very profound moment, and there's certain things I don't want to say. and other things that I do. So it was just incredible to talk about what art can mean to somebody that's young and how they can progress and what they can use to get them where they want to be, and how tracing in essence is art, and how it can be used as a tool to craft your skill, and to almost, to me, it's almost like, well, hey, I like to lift weights. I want to get better at doing a certain exercise. Well, I don't get better doing that exercise talking about it. I don't get better doing that exercise researching it. I don't get better doing that exercise by thinking about it or any of those other things. The only way I get better at doing that exercise is by doing that exercise. Doing it again and again and again and again and again and again until you build these neural pathways between your brain and your body that it just knows, this is the way I do this. And I think that... No, in fact, I know, and I think Neal knows, or at least I think that's what he was trying to present, that it's a good way to circumvent artistic stagnation and trying to add to your artistic repertoire. When he's selling a Wonder Woman print that looks exactly like Gal Gadot, I mean, are you buying it because of how he drew it, or are you buying it because he drew it? And it's because it's Neal drawing. I think we buy it because he drew it. And again, I can't think of how many times fans have asked me if I drew my own artwork, and I say yes. And on occasion, they're like, some might say, do you trace? Like, what are you doing? And I've always been offended by thinking that I might trace, but really, my style is a progression of the 16 grid, like where you break an image that's roughly 8.5 by 11 down into 16. Or 32, or whatever you can divide it by. And I learned that when doing the human head, you really, especially right now, the way you're looking at me, you just need this, this, and this. And then, maybe right in here, and a rough idea of how the distance here. And from there, you just, the repetition over and over again, making sure you know how the folds in the eye look. Then again, like when I do my comic book style, I'm trying to be conscientious of not doing those things and trying to make it look like my own comic book style. Anyways, like I said, Neal didn't have to take time out of his busy day to talk to just a young artist up and coming. Like I said, there were parts of this conversation that will remain private between myself and him and my wife and a few close friends. But it was profound. I mean, it made me rethink a few things, especially the teaching of art to children and what that means, and if anything else means anything, really. Anyways, Dredfunn out.
This has been a Dredfunn.com production. Thanks for watching.